Thank you, Colin. It's always a pleasure being in Australia, being in Melbourne, talking to AIJAC. I will offer a few observations about the situation, and then we can have a conversation. I will start by quoting somebody who is truly illustrious, Professor Barnard Lewis, 95 years old, and going strong. And lately we asked him, he's our teacher, we asked Professor Lewis, what's going to happen, he says, in the Middle East in 5 years' time. And here came the answer. He said, I have no clue what's going to be here in 5 years' time. But I know what is going to happen in 50 years. His answer was, any Arab who can afford to do that will be in Europe. Those millions will not be able to make a living anymore in this region. I'm giving this anecdote to our staff. I'm giving you this anecdote from Lewis, not just because I respect his judgment and insight the way I do, but also in order to illustrate the general hopelessness that people in the region feel. There is a sentiment which is not a sentiment of hope and expectation and elation because of the Arab Spring and the revolutions and the sacking of dictator number 1 and dictator number 2. There is a widespread sentiment, very strong and politically very powerful, that we are going nowhere. With Mubarak or without. A comment on Australia. I think, or that was my impression so far, because I've been here now mainly with my family, my brother-in-law is here, not dealing with politics or meeting people. It's not the right season. But I think that not enough attention, not sufficient attention was given in Australia to the entry of a big Australian company, Woodside, to the Middle East. And that's important. I'll just make one remark, not because it's a huge deal, but it has a political dimension. And I will be surprised if I learn that the Australian government was not consulted at one point or another, because the Israelis had a firm offer from Mr. Putin. And you can guess the way that Mr. Putin is putting forward proposals to which you are not supposed to refuse. And he did that on a visit to Jerusalem. And he said, let's Gazprom enter the newly discovered gas and hopefully oil fields of the Eastern Mediterranean. And he said, Putin, I am the only one, Russia, I am the only one who can guarantee that there will be no attack of surface-to-sea missiles from Lebanon, from Syria, against the gas platforms. If I am there, Hezbollah or Assad, they don't shoot. This is the ultimate shield. And the Israelis have decided that they don't want to go to sleep with the bear, even if the bear has the best intentions. And they went for the Woodside offer, which was considerably lower than the Gazprom offer. What I'm trying to say, this deal is affecting and will be affecting our very complex relationship with Putin's Russia. This is about Australia. The second is about the elections we are going to have next week. It's unprecedented, but as of this morning, tonight in Israel, as of this morning, there are about 28%, almost a third, of the Israeli electorate are undecided. But, more to that, it's not that they are undecided whether to vote for party X or party Y. Most of them are so flexible and so confused that they could end up voting to the right or the left. You can't call these elections. And anybody, and those pollsters who are trying to analyze this huge block of undecided voters come up with very different predictions, which I wouldn't trust. So it's very open. I think at the end of the day, there is one big question. Bibi, the Prime Minister Netanyahu, would like to have a right-center extending all the way to the left coalition. He wants to have Mrs. Livni. He wants to have the Labour Party under an ex-colleague of mine from Channel 2 television. He wants to have Mr. Lapid, another ex-colleague of mine from Channel 2 television, not just the ultra-Orthodox and the religious party, which is emerging as a probably the third strongest in Israel, the non-Orthodox, the more of the secular type movement under Mr. Bennett. But it may be that Mr. Netanyahu will not have it his way, and it will be, in my opinion, quite unfortunate if he will be forced at the end of the day, the morning after the elections, to form a coalition with only with the Orthodox Party and the religious pro-settler party to his right. That would be very complex in terms of Israel's image, more importantly in terms of his own freedom of maneuver politically at home. And I'm truly upset with my ex-colleagues from television, that's people with whom we worked for years together, because they are cornering themselves, both Lapid and Sheli Yachimowicz and Labour, etc. They are cornering themselves into a position in which they will not be able to join a Bibi-led coalition. And a Bibi-led coalition it will be. So that's the question. What kind of coalition government will we get? Will the Prime Minister enjoy enough freedom of maneuver, or will be in a way some sort of hostage to the rank? Few of the challenges, a paragraph on each. In Egypt, which is the country that counts, we don't know, and I cannot tell you. I used to live years and years in Egypt, but I cannot tell you. And the same goes for my friends in Egypt, and I have many. Whether Mr. Morsi, the president of Egypt now, sees himself as the Mr. Morsi elected to be president, or as the errand boy of the Muslim Brotherhood. My inclination so far is to suspect that he was tamed by the movement, by the Muslim Brotherhood. And when you look at the room allocation in the presidential palace in northern Cairo, you see that next door to the president are the rooms allocated for the old party sons of the Muslim Brotherhood, Untitled Chapter, tried to run for president, and people like this. I'm not sure the president is calling the shots. Egypt is bankrupt. They have foreign currency reserves of $14 billion for a country of 85 million people. They are being kept just a bit above the water by Qatar. Qatar is the banker of the Muslim Brotherhood movement anywhere. They are keeping them with injections of $4 billion deposits at the central bank at the time. But a country like Egypt cannot survive like this for long. And we see that the Muslim Brotherhood have difficulty in asserting their monopoly of power. There is a very strong, I don't have the time to go into the details now, there is a very strong coalition of opposition parties which keeps going back to the square. And the regime in Egypt is what I call squareocracy. It's the rule by the square. And every time, it's different people who go to the square after the Friday prayer. And now it's the anti-Muslim Brotherhood people. So the government is not really governing. Which leads me to the Sinai Peninsula. Egypt, which is strategically very important. Egypt has lost control over the Sinai Peninsula. Sinai Peninsula is the size of Tasmania, 3 times bigger than the state of Israel. The Egyptian government has become an absentee landlord. They send the army, and they have what they call Operation Eagle to root out the terrorist safe havens all over the peninsula. I call it Operation Clipped Wings Eagle, because they are doing nothing except showing the flag and having a roadblock here, roadblock there. The Sinai now is a basis for a growing number of terrorist factions, partly Salafis, Muslim jihadists coming from mainland Egypt and recruited from the Bedouin, local Bedouin nomad population. Many are coming from different other Muslim countries, especially from Libya. We have seen Libyan and Saudi suicide bombers on the border of Israel for the first time ever. And the collapse in the Sinai can ignite a major confrontation. They have the best weapons you can think of. Better than the Syrian rebels, by the way. Much better. They have anti-aircraft manpads, shoulder missiles, up to SA-24. All the way, 16, 18, 22, it's Soviet, Russian-made weapons. They have 3rd and 4th generation anti-tank weapons, missiles. Coronet, Matisse, whatever you can think of. It's coming from all over the place, mainly Libya, but also sent from Iran and coming from the Balkans. Now, I've been saying for a year now, there's nobody like you, thank you.
You are so divine.
Thank you.
It's very popular.
I've been saying for almost around a year now, that because I make it my business to follow especially the Sinai, and I'm telling you what I said to the American Special Operations Command and what I'm saying to the Canadian intelligence and anybody who wants to talk to discuss Sinai. That is, those people who have mounted so far attacks and fired missiles at Israel, at one point they are going to interfere with the shipping in the Suez Canal, in the Gulf of Aqaba, in the Gulf of Suez. It doesn't stop at our border, where we have completed now a 240 kilometers long of fence, 5 to 7 meters high, 2 meters deep into the ground, etc., etc. So the Sinai, that neglected peninsula, which is not as beautiful as Tasmania, believe me, can become the point where you will have the explosion. And the Americans, unfortunately, the Obama administration, I'm speaking only about this point. The American administration is not conditioning the help it is extending to Mr. Morsi, the president of Egypt, with any measures that he should be taken, for example, in the Sinai. And it's relatively easy, because once you monitor the Suez Canal, 100 kilometers long, with very few passes, nobody can go into the Sinai. 90% of the weapons will be intercepted. But there is nothing on the Suez Canal. Not in the tunnel, not on the bridge, not on the ferry. All the Americans have to do is tell the Egyptians, I'm putting it simplistically, but that's basically what it is. Tell the Egyptians, unless you take the appropriate measures on the Suez Canal, we will have to think about it. They are not doing it so far, maybe with the new administration, old administration taking in, it will be there. A word about Syria. I would say forget about it. It's not going to be nice. Syria is imploding, is getting fragmented. There is no cohesion amongst the opposition forces, if forces they are. The leading armed factions in Syria today are Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra and people like this. Those politicians that we hear in conferences outside, having meetings and speeches, political programs, have no say on the ground. Nobody is going to intervene. I don't see that. What would people do if he decides to use, even on a limited scale, chemical weapons? Assad? I don't think people will do much. As long as it's inside Syria. That's my belief. It's horrible. And I think he knows that. You have heard all the big talk by Erdogan, the Prime Minister of Turkey, soon to become the president. Turkey is doing nothing. The US is doing nothing. Europe is doing nothing. We are doing nothing. So in Syria may emerge as a source of trouble for everybody, whether if it is fragmented to different statelets, we can go into that, or whether it's, at the end of the day, the main arms depot and the capital are controlled by pro-Qaeda Islamist factions, as seems to be the case now. A paragraph about the Palestinians. I do not believe that there will be a serious, sincere reconciliation between Hamas and the Gaza Strip and the Palestinian Authority, now calling itself the Palestinian State after the UN vote with abstention of Australia, whether they will, they changed all the letterheads. Now it's the State of Palestine, and it's no longer the Palestinian Authority. And I'm telling you as an Israeli that they have violated the accords legally, the agreements they have in Israel, with Israel, internationally binding agreements, the Oslo Accords and the follow-up agreements, by going unilaterally to the UN. And for different countries, including yours, that was okay. So I don't think there will be a reconciliation. Number two, I've been saying in this room over and over, so I will not repeat it, I don't think the Palestinians have an interest in a final status deal with Israel. Read the recent speeches by Mr. Abbas. Read what he says. And we are stuck as Israel, we are stuck with the dilemma. What do you do if your adversary, interlocutor, potentially, hopefully, your partner, is not interested and sticks to this strategy that I've been talking to you before, which everybody can see now, which is collapsing into our unwilling arms? What does he say, Mr. Abbas? I see him a lot, I talk to him a lot, I've known him for many years. What does he say? He's saying publicly that he will hand over the keys of the Palestinian Authority to Bibi. That's the collapse. And there is more talk about a unitarian state, some talk about different forms of confederation, etc. Anything except two-state solution. And it's not going to change. That means Israel will have to make independent unilateral moves in order almost to compel the Palestinians to go for statehood. And that's very complex. I think that Bibi has to mount an initiative for a very generous interim agreement encompassing up to 90% of the West Bank territory, and be willing to go for an agreement which the donor states will force on the Palestinians, short of a peace treaty, just an armistice. And finally, Iran. I always prefer to avoid talking about Iran. It's a problem. About Iran. The Iranians are inching forward and sometimes backwards towards nuclear capability. I don't have the time, and I don't think it's important to go into the analysis. What does it mean, nuclear capability? Because different intelligence services have different answers. The point is that I'm making is there is no Iranian race to the bomb. They are not in a hurry. Persian culture is not about pace and speed, but they are moving ahead on a very broad front. I said inching forward and sometimes backward. What I mean is they will enrich, for example, to 20%, and then they will take some part of the quantity and reach to 20%, which is the major step towards weaponization. They will take part of the enriched material and turn it into plates to use in reactors, etc., and then the process cannot be reversed. So the material can no longer be used to be packaged in a nuclear weapon. But they keep increasing the quantities that they have, and they're working on a weapon. No one that I know knows how far did they go. All the experts who built atomic bombs in their lives are telling us that this is not the major problem. How to package the enriched uranium, military grade, into a nuclear war. I think that we are doomed, all the region, the Arabs, the Gulf states, everybody, we are doomed to many years in which the Iranians will keep just hanging in there, just beneath the nuclear threshold, waiting for the right opportunity to go for the breakthrough, or as we call it, the sneak through. They will hang in there. They are already taking all the credit for being almost a nuclear power, and they will wait. The best thing for anybody who's interested in this stuff, the best thing is to read the stuff published by Olli Heinonen, who was the chief inspector of he's Finnish, now married to a Singaporean, now moving to Boston, and a friend. He's now, he was the chief technical inspector of the International Atomic Energy Commission in Vienna. He's the guy who knows best about what the Iranians are doing and where they are. And I think his description of what they are doing and where they are is accurate. Now, Mr. Olmert, and this will be the conclusion of my remarks, Mr. Olmert, the ex-prime minister, is saying that he thought that 2012 was the year of decision for Israel. He's blaming publicly the prime minister for wasting, quoting, 11 billion shekels. Let's say 3 billion Aussie dollars. On preparations and weapons and all sorts of gadgets for an attack on Iran which didn't take place. That's what you have in the public domain now. My reading of the situation is the following. Number one, I think it would be a mistake to assume that because President Obama has chosen Senator Hagel with his well-known positions on the Iranian issue and others as his new defense secretary. I do not think that this is an indication that at one point, if there is no deal worked out, and they are trying to work out a deal, the United States will not strike. Friends who served in top position in the White House under Obama, most outspokenly Dennis Ross, are saying that they do believe that Obama has it in him, and that if he reaches the conclusion that there is no way to stop the Iranians but to strike, he will. This is one. I don't know, but I wouldn't take lightly this argument. And I don't think the Iranians are taking it lightly. And I like the argument that probably the appointment of Hagel and then the new CIA chief, which is a worse nomination, Brennan, it could be because the president wants to have next to him on the podium, if he goes for a strike against Iran, he wants to have people like Hagel and Brennan, so that everybody is convinced that there was no other way. Could be. Second, Israel. Again, I think it would be a mistake to rule out, and we all know all the arguments by now, to rule out an Israeli strike. I think the Israelis believe, right or wrong, but they believe that they can inflict much more severe damage to the Iranian nuclear project than is generally assumed by pundits in the press, especially pundits in the press, and ex-generals and admirals. This is the view that you hear from the Americans as well. believing that if nobody else is going to act and the Iranians are going to weaponize, the Israelis may go for what their planners promised to be a devastating blow to the Iranian program, delaying it for more than a year or two. I think people have to, I don't know how widely it was reported in the Aussie press, but some of you, I'm sure, have noticed the Israeli operation in Khartoum, where a shipment from Iran of a big amount of Fajr 5 missiles, the kind of missiles that they were trying to lob at Tel Aviv and Jerusalem from the Gaza Strip. A huge shipment was knocked out by the Israeli Air Force in Khartoum, the capital of Sudan. That is 1,900 kilometers away from the closest Israeli air base. The Iranian nuclear facilities are less than 1,500 kilometers from the Israeli air bases. That operation in Khartoum was conducted because the Israelis didn't want the Fajr missiles to reach the Sinai, because in Sinai the terrorists have immunity. We are not going to violate Egyptian sovereignty under the current sensitive relations with the new regime in Egypt. But that was a message to Iran. And we see that the Iranians have taken it seriously because they are not trying since then to use this route. So it's going to be interesting in the Middle East next year too. And I'll stop here.